Welcome back to another really kind of special episode of these DM clinics. This is my good friend Jono, as they call him, or Jonathan Grapsas from Australia. And Jono is going to share some intel about high value packs, which I'm excited for you to hear. So, Jono, why don't you tell us about it?
Thanks, mate. Thank you for having me. Hi to everyone in Canada and anyone else who's watching us around the world. As you know, because we've been working on this sort of stuff for a long time. I think when we started, you had hair and I had less grey hair, so that shows how long it's been. But yeah, look, I think one of the things that sort of we focus on with our clients when it comes to their appeals is a lot of organizations are focused on this sort of bottom-up approach, which is very much about getting lots of people and volume into your program. Our approach is kind of the reverse of that, which is what we call the top-down approach. So it's very much focusing on your top group of supporters. Now, for some organizations, that might be their top 20 donors. For others, it might be their top 500. It really just depends on the size of their program and I guess the capacity and resource they've got to spend on those top donors. So I guess beauty is in the eye of the beholder in terms of what that looks like. But for most of our clients here in Australia and sort of the size of the programs are probably similar to the ones that you guys are working on in Canada. That's usually like your top couple of hundred donors per appeal. And what we try and do is try and make those supporters feel like they're on the inside track, that they're hearing from the CEO's desk, that they're personally writing to them, that they're personally contacting them. And that includes lots of different things. It's stock treatment, it's high value gifts and additional things that go in the pack. But one of the things that we've done a lot of over the last few years is tried to make our top supporters feel special by inviting them to things. So invitations to events. Now, in the last few years, particularly through COVID, some of those invitations to events were virtual things. But it extends a little bit further than that. And now that we're back to holding in-person events, we've certainly seen that the uptake is probably better than ever and certainly even higher than pre-COVID levels. But a few years ago, when we started to look at ways to invite donors to come along to events, particularly during or before appeal periods. So doing tours, coming to shelters and going through personal visits and so forth. We started to think about whether we could actually prove whether this was having a positive impact. I think intuitively we all knew it was the right thing to do, to invite your donors to come along and to make them feel like they're on that inside track. But we actually wanted to prove it. So we had a client who was up for doing that. And, they had a reasonable sized program, probably contacting about 20,000 supporters per appeal. And their top sort of group of donors was split into like a top 1,000 group. And I think from memory, those donors were giving about $500 each per appeal. So that's sort of to give you some context of the size of that program. So that appeal was constructed and we actually, as I said, split it into two groups. We had a control and a test group. The only difference between those two groups was that half of those donors, so 500 of them, received an invitation to come along and do a tour of their facilities, okay? And the other half didn't. That was the only difference. The pack, the makeup of it was identical. One half of those group received the invitation. The fascinating part about that was that whether or not they responded to the invitation and called up and said, yes, I'd love to come, or they ignored it, or they emailed back and said, thank you so much for the invitation, but I can't make it. None of that made a difference. There was no correlation between their response to the invitation and whether or not they contributed to the appeal. The only difference was whether they received the invitation versus whether they didn't. And the group that received the invitation generated about $40,000 more in income than the group that didn't. Okay, so literally, it wasn't quite double the income, but it was a significant portion of income more that they generated in that group, purely and simply because that organisation reached out and said, we'd love you to come along. You're one of our most important supporters. You've done amazing stuff for us. Please, we'd love to show you the work that you've helped to contribute to, which was really cool. So in some ways, it was kind of like, it wasn't that they turned up on the day and they had the experience. No. So the thing that we took from that is that, invite as far and wide as you possibly can, because the act of saying, please, we'd love you to come along is the most important thing.
And did you do this? So you would do a spring appeal about saving the wombat or whatever, and there would be an extra piece in the mailing, like
Yeah.
folded and something like.
Physical piece, absolutely. So ideally, whether you include it in the first wave of the mailing and then you held the event in between when that went out and say the second wave going out, Sometimes we did it as a separate piece, maybe before the first letter went out, like as a DL, little postcard slip or something like that. The key point is though, mate, is that it's something, ideally something physical that they receive, that it's tactile. They can, they can feel, they can see it. So how you do that is kind of, up for discussion and debate. But the point is that they receive something in the post that said, "Hey, John, you're incredible.
Yeah.
We'd love to show you how much we think about your support. Can you please come along and have a look on this day? Let us know if you can make it. We'd love to see you."
Wow. Okay. That's really interesting. I've never heard
Mhm.
of it before.
Yeah,
Um, okay. I would love to see an example. If you do ever get your hands on an example and you can send it to me, I might include it with the email that I will send everyone with the
absolutely.
video. Because again, I am familiar with your packs, and to be clear, in Australia and a few other places, they do waves of mailings for appeals, not just a one-off
Yeah,
appeal. And you never hear about this thing ever again. There's two or three or three and a half waves of
yeah,
mail pieces, so that's a little bit different for people. So I can see how you'd have a few touch points during
yeah,
a small course of time.
yeah.
That would be different.
Yeah, and I think, one of the things that often when we talk to charities about this, they'll say, well, we don't have, airplanes to show people, or we don't have a shelter to walk people through and show them the animals that are being cared for or in surgery and so forth. That's okay. Because again, it doesn't really matter. I mean, you may be taking people to somewhere off site. You may be taking them to quite a sterile boardroom. Okay, sure, it's not the same as walking through, the halls of the RSPCA and seeing animals in care, but it's still something. And I think it's important to recognise that the key thing here is the reaching out and saying, we'd love to show you around. We'd love to talk to you about the work that we're doing. It doesn't matter whether it's inviting them to some sort of crusty old offices, or a hospital and walking them through the ward. It's literally just the olive branch to say that we think you're amazing, and we'd love to show you some of our work or talk to you about some of our work firsthand. That's the key thing. So don't use it as a barrier. I think sometimes organisations go, well, I'm not, Royal Flying
You're
Doctor
doing
Service from,
this
yeah,
thing. Yeah, yeah. But
exactly.
that's
Yeah.
where you can be creative and do lots of different things, right?
Yeah, and also being creative. As I said, there was 2 years or so here, which what there was in your part of the world, where we couldn't do this sort of stuff. And of course, we got creative. We did things like, obviously, we did virtual stuff. We've had our friends at Save the Bilby Fund, do live Zooms where they're taking you through the breeding facilities and showing you if you can't be there because they're, an 8-hour drive to get there. We've had sort of invitations during COVID, where we sent almost like an IOU to say, we'd love you to come to an event. We can't do it right now because we're separated, but when we're back to be able to doing that, let us know whether you want to do something or come and see us, and we'll get you in to have a look at our facilities when the time's right. So again, yeah, to use your point, absolutely be creative. Don't use it as a barrier.
I have nothing else to add. That's brilliant. I really like this idea. I want to try it. I'm thinking of a client right
Yeah,
now that I would love to try this on and just see what happens. But very cool. Thank you, Jono.
yeah, yeah.
Anything else you want to say?
My pleasure, mate. Thanks for having me.
Okay, good.
I
Th-
just, yeah,
Go
okay.
ahead. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, that's one part we've talked about, which is events. I guess the other thing that I would say is that there are other ways to make your supporters feel that really that special. And in addition to all the wonderful things we can do with high value touch points and handwritten and personalized and all the things I know you talk about a lot, right? So that's a given. But again, to use the expression used before, be creative. I mean, one of the things that, obviously running events is time consuming, it's resource heavy, there's a lot of logistics to organize and so forth. But who's to say that you can't get, a personalized message, a video message from your CEO out to some of your supporters? We've done this a lot over the years, whether it's actually sent by SMS and as a little video message. We sometimes send, video messages on a USB and send it in the package and make it look really special and put a little ribbon on it and a boxed out or something. And the supporter opens it and thinks, well, what's this? This is pretty cool. Oh, John, the CEO of such and such, has sent me a video message for me. And it's actually got a personalized message that's been recorded. Somebody's taken the time to sit there and record a video for me.
Mm.
Again, you still need to get your CEO in a room for half a day and video these messages and so forth, but don't overthink it. It doesn't have to be a schmick production and a polished video. It just needs to be real and authentic and heartfelt. So they're the sort of things as well that you can do. It doesn't have to be about, I don't want people to take away and go, oh, I have to run a physical event because Jono and John talked about it. Think about other ways that your CEO can reach out and talk to your supporters. So that's probably the thing I'd leave you with, is to Yeah, be inventive, be creative, be authentic in the way that your CEO or your leadership, maybe it's a board member, maybe it's a head of services, reaches out to your supporters and lets them know that they really care about them.
Brilliant. Thank you, John. Lovely. There you
My
go. You
pleasure.
got another
All right.
great tip about
Good.
something to do in your DM if you wish, and we'll see you on the next video whenever I get around to sending it to you. So thanks for joining us.